Welcome back to your learning journey on the statistics and the probability for data science. Now, in this video, let us look into the various types of events whenever we are talking about the probability. Now, from the last video of basics, I have mentioned that we have something called as a sample space. Now, sample space consists of all the possible set of events that can happen. For example, if I'm tossing a coin, so in my sample space, I'll have a head and I'll have a tail. So this is what my sample space will be made up of. Now when I'm calculating the probability, I'll be calculating the probability in terms of these individual events. So this is what we know from the last session. Now when we talk about these events, okay, there are various types of events whenever we talk about the probability. So each type of event will have its own set of individual properties, and this classification of events in probability will help us to simplify the mathematical calculation. So let us understand about the events in the probability. So here when I talk about the events, so as I mentioned, these events are the outcome of an experiment. Okay, it's an outcome of an experiment. Suppose if I am tossing a coin, the heads and tail, these are the events. So the heads and tails together, we call it as a sample space. Now the subset of my sample space, we generally call it as an event. Now when we talk about these events, there are various types of event. So the first type of classification that I want to talk right now is called as a dependent events and the independent events. Okay, independent and dependent events. So let us understand what exactly does it mean by a dependent events and the independent events. Suppose if I consider the independent events in probability are actually those events whose outcome does not depend on the previous outcome. No matter how many times an experiment is actually conducted, the probability of occurrence of the independent events will be the same. To give you an example, so tossing a coin is actually an independent event in the probability. Okay, so when I'm tossing a coin, so it is actually an independent event where whatever the outcome that has occurred in the previous experiment, that will have a zero impact when I'm conducting the experiment next time. So these kind of events is called as a independent events. And we have something called as a dependent events. So in the case of dependent events, here these are the events where the outcome depends on the previous outcome. Now this would imply that the probability of occurrence of a dependent event will be affected by some previous outcome. For example, in this case of dependent events, to give you an example, maybe traveling your trip or planning your trip next month is dependent on getting the bonus this month. So that is an example of a dependent event. Okay, so independent events are the type of events where the probability or the chance of occurrence does not have any impact on the next event. Now dependent event is a type of event where the outcome of one event has an impact on the other event. And when we talk about the probability, we have other kinds of events. So one is commonly known as complementary events. So complementary events where it's the opposite of the event that we are expecting. Okay, so that's what we call it as a complementary events. So whenever there are two events such that one event can occur, and if only if the other does not take place, then such event I'm going to call it as a complementary event in the probability. The sum of the probability of complementary events will always be equal to 1. To give you an example, whenever I'm tossing a coin, okay, if I say E as the probability of getting the head, then complement of E, which is nothing but it will be the event of getting the tail. So I can say that the E and the complement of E together make up the complementary events. So these kind of events are mutually exclusive and sometimes it can be mutually exhaustive. So we have now understood about the complementary event. So there is something called as the mutually exclusive events. Now, in the case of mutually exclusive events, so these are the events that cannot occur at the same time. So mutually exclusive events in probability do not have common outcome. So that's the overall idea about this mutually exclusive event. And we have got the exhaustive event. So exhaustive event in the probability, okay, they are actually those events when they are actually taken together from the sample space of a random experiment. So I can say that when the experiment is performed, okay, a set of events out of which at least one is for sure is going to occur, then they are called as an exhaustive event. For example, the outcome of an examination is either pass or a fail. Okay, that is an example of an exhaustive event. Okay, so like this you're going to come across the various type of event. These were the important types of events which you need to remember. Now we will make use of all these concepts whenever we are solving the problems related to probability. All right, so with this we come to the end of this video on types of events in the probability. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video of our learning journey.